It's almost riding season, or if you live in California, I guess it never stopped. A little unfair. But we need to do some maintenance to the motorcycles to get them operational before summer comes. This is my 76 CB750. I've rode it a couple times this year already, but I want to do some maintenance on it because I've actually never done anything to the bike since I bought it a little less than a year ago. We're gonna do an oil change, not bolt check, and just look everything over one time and make sure it's okay, and then perhaps there's a couple things we might need to order, as is life with old motorcycles. I'm gonna bring you guys along the process, but step one before we do the oil change is we gotta get it a little warm. Getting some heat into the bike will allow the oil to flow a little bit better, so we're just going to have an excuse for a cold startup, I suppose. Seems like one thing we need to add to the list is to charge the battery. The bike's been sitting for a while. Now I just rode it up and down the street a little bit. Got a little bit of heat into the engine. The one thing you need to worry about when the engine is a little hot is the oil is going to be hot. So when you're removing the oil, just be careful because you can burn yourself. I didn't let it get too hot, but just enough to get some of the oil moving and for it to flow a little bit easier. So an oil change is fairly easy. The oil lives right here because of the dry sump system. This is how you check the oil. As you can see, my oil is pretty black. So it's about time I change it. I don't know when the last time it was changed. I drove it a few hundred miles last year. The oil, I did check it last year and it seemed pretty good. So I'm not too concerned about the health of this oil, but it's always good to check because like I said, I don't know how old it was because I bought the bike last year and just been running on the same oil. First drain is right here, 17 millimeters. See if I can get this loose. What we're gonna do is just get this bolt loose like so. Have it spinning in our hands, but don't fully undo it. Usually there would be a better funnel you can get for the bikes. The funnel will get to your pan a little bit better, but I don't have it because, of course, I'm a genius that way. But simply all we're going to do is just unscrew this and the oil is going to come out. It's quite a bit of threads on there. Did not expect that to be so long. Try not to spill, but it's always impossible to not spill. And we're just going to let that drain. Oil is much more black than I was expecting it to be, but it doesn't look flaky or anything like that, so it's in pretty good health overall, I would say. And we're just going to let that finish draining. And when it stops dripping, you're going to just put the plug back on ever so carefully. Usually pretty hard to not spill. Got a little bit of oil. We're going to clean that up before we go to the next step. It's pretty imperative that you clean off everything, especially with this one because the exhaust lives right under it. And you're probably gonna end up spilling a little on your exhaust if you were like me and didn't have a proper funnel. And well, you don't want any fire or anything like that. So clean off everything and try to keep it as nice and tidy as possible. Now we're just gonna tighten this bolt back up. I think the torque spec is around 20 Newton meters. Nothing crazy. Definitely don't want to over tighten it. So after that we can move on to the second drain location and the filter. So the next drain location is actually underneath the bike. It's this bolt right here. That'll take all the oil that's sitting on the bottom of the engine or in the engine out. What we're going to do is undo that. A little bit of oil, not too much, will come out of it. We'll turn the motor over by giving it a couple kicks. Kicking the bike over will force any other oil that's being left over that isn't being gravity fed out to force it out. So you can use the same 17 millimeter. Alright, it took a second because I believe these were over torqued. There it goes. Like I said, there shouldn't be too much. It's already done draining there. No chunks, no metal flakes. We'll see and look at the filter one time, probably cut it open just to see the health of the motor. When kicking over the bike, turn your kill switch off and make sure the key's on the off position. You're not trying to start it, you're just trying to turn it over. And that should do it. Now reinstall that and we can move to the filter. Now the filter is actually what I believe to be a 12 millimeter. Don't forget to move your oil pan forward and you should just be able to sneak in here. as we can see here, this is what the filter looks like, or the filter housing, I should say, what that looks like. Filter just lives inside of there. There's an O-ring here, which you should inspect. Mine looks good, and I'm gonna reinstall it with it. The next time that I change the oil, probably next year, I will make sure to change this out, or at that time inspect it. But I'll probably just get a new one because it's probably a cheap piece. Old oil filter looks good. Now we can just install the new one and put oil in it. Actually, I take it back. My filter came with the O-ring, so I'm gonna replace that. New ring installed. Old one looked fine, but we're just gonna put a little bit of oil on this and a little bit of oil on the filter as well, just so it's kind of pre-lubed. I believe that's how Honda actually says to install this back on. A little tricky, my first time ever doing it, but now we are all ready to add oil onto the bike. Always make a mess. No way around it for an oil change, I suppose, unless you get it up on the table. But it is what it is. You spill a little, all good. That's kind of part of the job. So now you're ready to add the oil. One time before adding the oil, I recommend you go through and just check all three of the bolts so that they're not leaking. And this motorcycle takes 3 quarts of oil. I have an owner's manual somewhere, but it's hidden. It's not in the seat like it's supposed to be, but online says 3 quarts. We'll fill 3 quarts and then check it and make sure that's the correct amount. These motorcycles take 10 W40 motor oil as per Honda's recommendations. I'm not going to get into it with you guys in the comment section as to what motor oil to use, what brand to use. That's all up to personal discretion. My recommendation is 10 W30, just like they're supposed to be. Your machine will probably run just fine. Now you're probably not going to get the most accurate reading until you fire the bike up, but just to make sure that she has oil. It's probably also going to read a little high because all of it's sitting in here and hasn't gone into the motor yet. Let's pull the bike out, turn it on, inspect for any leaks, and make sure everything's good to go, and check the oil. Start the bike up, we'll let it run for a second or two, more like 45 to a minute. Make sure she's not leaking, and then we'll check the oil. Come over, check the oil one time, check the level, and looks like it's just about right, but I am going to add it just a little bit more. It's right above the fill line, so I can add just a little bit more and get it to the middle there. I'm all sweaty, the sun's nice and hot, but the oil is changed in the bike, and that's how you do an oil change in an old CB750. If that helped any of you guys, let me know in the comment section if you want to see more videos like this on just simple maintenance, because there's a lot to do on most of these bikes. So if you want to see more videos like this, otherwise if you don't want to see simple videos on kind of how to work on some of these older motorcycles, or perhaps not how-tos, but how I'm doing it, and maybe you'll learn something or just get a visual of what you need to do to your bike. I know there's not a ton of videos out on these motorcycles, but they're fairly simple. I don't know, I'm a visual learner, I don't know about you guys. With all that hard work I just put in, I'm gonna make sure she's not leaking, let her run for a little bit longer, and take it out for a ride, because, well, that's the whole point of doing the maintenance, is to reap the rewards. For a second there, I thought it was leaking oil on the ground, but just my float sticking. Need to fix those carburetors.